Hey folks, this is Bailey from Dank Wargaming.
Hey, this is Heath with Team Table World Hawaii.
And welcome to the Path to Redemption, the Warhammer 40,000 Dark Angels podcast. Our aim is to provide Dark Angels with the tactical and hobby skills that they need in order to enjoy this wonderful hobby of ours. And today we're joined by a very special guest. Alan Percival is here. He is the 27th best Dark Angels player in the world according to the ITC, and the 6th best in the United Kingdom. Plus, he administrates the competitive Dark Angels Facebook/meta group. Welcome, Alan.
Hi there, how's it going?
Well, I think we ran into you in a conversation on the Dark Angels 40K competitive Facebook page, and it was like, man, this was an interesting conversation and got a lot of interesting things to say. So we invited you on, and we've been talking a lot about Ravenwing in the last couple weeks, or last couple months, I guess, and you've had some success with Deathwing, so I guess we thought it was a great opportunity to revisit how Deathwing are doing in the current meta and see what you're doing that everyone else isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough spot, Deathwing, to be honest. But I think having played them a lot, that there's still legs to them. Just.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the lots of stubborn defiance was kind of took out one of the legs to the four-legged stool, so it still balances. You just got to be careful.
It's the 3 secondaries they lost: stubborn defiance
to
the last, and whatever the one was where you got 3 and more.
Stranglehold.
Thank you.
Stranglehold. Yeah.
Those were the 3 go-tos that scored you 80 to 90, even on a loss sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, it was hard, and I think a lot of people left at that point and went Ravenwing, and I think a lot of people are doing really well with Ravenwing.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, we have an interesting meta watch to pop off. So I don't know if anybody recognizes the name Stu Black. He is the lead designer for Warhammer 40,000, and he played in a grand tournament this last month. So he played an Ultramarine successor called Iron Hawks, which was Bolter Fusillades and Master Artisans. And how did he do? The answer was not well. Then you would be correct. So briefly tell you what this guy had, what he had in his list. So I said Ultramarine successors, looks like a battalion, a Phobos Librarian with Tenebrous Curse and Hallucinate. So that's the Tenebrous Curse is the movement restriction one.
Spell,
and the -1 to hit, yeah.
Yeah.
Then a Primaris Captain. That was so he had a Mastercrafted Stalker Bolt Rifle and Rites of War. And then 1 squad of 10 Infiltrators, 3 squads of 5 Intercessors, a Redemptor Dreadnought, another Redemptor Dreadnought, and then 1, 2, 3 squads of 6 Inceptors. And then an Eliminator squad.
So what's the Rites of War for? I mean, what's he
I
giving
don't know.
obsec to with that many troops?
Maybe the Dreadnoughts? or the HQ itself.
I mean, the successor abilities aren't bad for a shooting gun line.
True.
Re-roll a hit with your Redemptors. That's going to be good. Presumably they've got bolters in them as well.
Well, yeah, they've all got the storm bolters, right?
You can have storm bolters or grenade launchers.
Usually you go with the storm bolters, though.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Especially if you're an Ultramarine and you want to stay in the tactical doctrine.
Yeah.
Plus, he has that Overwatch stratagem.
Mm-hmm.
The Overwatch stratagem is really good. The redeploy stratagem, but what would you do? Deploy really aggressively with your Redemptors and then redeploy them if you go second, I guess?
I would usually see that with like the Invictor war suits.
Yeah.
So you could just put them right in the face. But yeah, like there's not a lot the Inceptors, it looks like Bolter Inceptors because they're only 240 points per squad, which makes sense because the whole list is built around bolters. But
and that's his only real punch, but he's got nothing to support the punch. No chapter tactics to support it. I mean, his characters aren't melee, so they're not going to go and support him. So he's a gunline in a non-gunline meta with non-gunline missions.
Yeah, it's a tough list. I mean, it's an interesting concept. I got wrecked by a list very similar to this back at the end of 8th edition, which did hey, I've got all these inceptors with bolters, but they're Imperial Fists, and then they can do the thing that turns them also into Crimson Fists, so they double explode 6s, and everything just melts. But this doesn't have that level of output.
But with 8th edition, I only rejoined back in the end of 8th after having played as a kid. But in 8th edition, scoring was at the end of the game, right? So you basically shot everything off the board and then moved and scored. Is that right?
Right.
Well, it was at the end of the turn. So ITC was still a progressive score. But it was so the basic format was you had to kill one unit and hold one objective per turn for your basic. And then if whoever killed more or held more at the end of the battle round got an additional, incentive point. So, but yeah, ultimately, if you just table your opponent, you're going to hold everything. So, yeah, there are some, I don't know, man. You'd think that the boss himself would have some insight, but 0 and 5. But this is what I think, Games Workshop kind of envisions the standard Marine list to be. And in a different meta, it might not be that bad.
Do you mean Shock Tactics hasn't fixed them? I mean, is that?
Oh, too soon.
Shock Tactics, not Shock Assault.
Shock Tactics, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
The thing is, the Coventry GTs run by UKTC, which is they win the LGT, which is the second largest event in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
And they use their own. Well, I can't remember where the train's from, but we call it the UKTC terrain. It's really good terrain, but it doesn't particularly support gun lines. There's lots of ruins to hide in. There's usually ruined walls in the middle, so lots of -1 to shoot if you're kind of shooting through gun lines. Melee armies can use ruins to get close and then charge. Potentially even ignoring Overwatch because you can charge out of ruins. It's not the sort of terrain I'd want to take a pure gunline army. I mean, something like Tau, where you can kind of move and shoot in combat and things, yeah, but not gunline Marines.
Yeah. I mean, if this had Gilliman in it, maybe it'd be a different story. But I don't know. I
can see that. Yeah, he's a game changer.
Yeah. Anyway, that's just the. Once again, it's unique to see someone of that caliber inside the design studio play in a game, and so it's worth remarking about. But yeah, Shock Tactics didn't fix it. Well, so his so first game was 18 points, second was 54, third was 47, fourth was 54, last was 47. So
who was the last game against?
Daniel Bradbury. The list was Chaos Knights. Looks like 3 big and a bunch of small. Abominate, Despoiler, Rampager, and then 2 Carnivores and 3 Stalkers.
So I can see why he went 0-4 to that point, probably. But yeah. Bolters are not going to deal well with Knights.
No, they're not. No, they are not. So, yeah. Okay. Well,
and I guess one last thought about MetaWatch from having done the research this month is that Blood Angels lists are the only Space Marine lists that I've seen that are the Loyalist Marine lists that are placing high, and the things that are getting them there are the Death Company, the Sanguinary Guard, and I'm assuming Vanguard vets, which, as a point of contention for me as a Dark Angels player, for us as Dark Angels players, that we can't run Vanguard vets because we have company vets, and there's no way to put jump packs on those company vets. And I've been salty about this the entire time because it would be so much fun to have jump pack, Lightning Claw, Storm Shield guys running around like everybody else, but no, we're not allowed to. So I
don't know.
That's just something an observation I've made.
You give that up for like Deathwing and Ravenwing, but yeah. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, sorry. I was going to say the Blood Angels list don't tend to use them. They tend to just go with the Sanguinary Guard and the Death Company. The Death Company, because they've got a great secondary, whereas they kill things with the Death Company, they score. But also, if they die with Death Company, they score. So they kind of score either way. And Sanguinary Guard are just ridiculous. Damage 2 weapons. Effectively, they've all got mastercrafted power swords.
2 up armor with armor contempt. Yeah.
And they get to choose where they fight. Mm-hmm. They get to
dictate
set
the pace.
They do. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So the tournament I went to last month, I went 2-1. The only game I dropped was into Space Wolves, mostly because he outsped me. Everything had jump packs, and the things that didn't have jump packs were Thunderwolves and Wolfen that moved like 8 inches. I killed everything. I set a trap in a little path or a pass for everything charged into 5 Deathwing Knights, and then popped Line Unbreakable. Nothing got to fight. I fell back and then just annihilated everything with plasma and Eradicator fire. But by that point, I had swung the the trading pieces. I just couldn't get to all the objectives. It was a hold 2, hold 3 mission. So Space Wolves can be real killy if you can get them there. But I don't know. So yeah,
we've lost Alan's voice. He bumped his
am I back?
button.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, sorry, I muted to cough and I thought I'd unmuted. Yeah, I was just saying, funny enough, I had a game playing my Space Wolves earlier against Bloody Rose.
Oh,
So
nice.
I kind of dusted them off and have a go, and they're so killy, and the fact that they can heroically intervene, and it really catches people out because you've got the strat where you can do it 6 inches, which is free with a character.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it just, and of course you've got the thing where it doesn't matter if the opponent didn't charge. At the end of their charge phase, as long as you've got someone within 6 inches, let's go and join that fight.
Yep, they're going to jump in. So, yeah, the way that their warlord traits work, where like if their character gets a charge, now everything has an aura of advance and charge and rerolls, and then they have that one relic that makes everything fight last, which is not just a character; you can put it on a unit. Is real tasty. So I had a chance at winning that game. I was basically, after I did my big trap and I killed everything in this one little path, I had 4 Centurions left that were going to move over to the next objective over and then punch his Redemptor Dreadnought to death. So I went to cast Righteous Repugnance on them so they could reroll everything, but it got denied. And I just didn't even think, because I was like so excited I was going to get this to happen. And I could have just moved my Librarians or Ezekiel 6 inches and been able to cast Repugnance without the opportunity for deny. Got denied. And then the Centurions did not kill the Dreadnought. And Space Wolves Dreadnoughts in the Assault Doctrine are not to be trifled with. He killed all 5 of those. All 5 Centurions just go.
Oh man.
And that flipped everything. But anyway, that's a lesson for another day. So man. All right. Well, Alan, I guess we can jump into our main segment. I think you mentioned that you started playing 40K when you were younger. What caused you to get out and what caused you to get back in?
So I got out because I moved out from home, basically. When I was 18, I moved out and didn't really have the space or time to play. I found at one point a local group that played Fantasy Battles. I got back into that about 5th, 6th edition. So I played Fantasy Battle for a little while and then sort of left that group, stopped playing. I bought the 6th edition set, which is where Dark Angels first came from. I bought that with my wife, so the idea was we were going to paint up an army each and have a little game, but turned out she wasn't interested when we sort of got to that stage. She's we live role play, we board game, so wargaming was kind of
worth a punt. Yeah,
it was worth a punt, but it wasn't there. So I never actually played 6th, and then that kind of went away again. And then when my son turned about 8, he found some of the miniatures and went, "Oh, Daddy, what's this?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, I can show you." Mm-hmm. I found a very cheap Space Wolf army online, bought it for him, painted up the Chaos half of 6th edition, played a few games, painted up the Dark Angels, bought a few more stuff, and it kind of spiraled out from there. And then I got my brother into it. He started playing very competitively, so I started playing very competitively, and we kind of went to a tournament, and it all kind of went from there, really.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I played, so when I was my first duty station in the Navy, one of my roommates played. It got me into it. We played for a couple years, and then I left, moved away, moved to Hawaii, and then you don't have a whole lot of time to play when you're on a submarine working, 100-hour weeks and spending 250 days a year at sea. But so a couple years later, I go back to shore duty, and that's when 5th edition 40K was out. So I jumped back into it, and then I think 6th edition came out right as I went back to another boat. Never, nope, never had time, and I got back in, 2 submarines later, when 8th edition came out, and I've just been going for it ever since. But
so you're telling me there's no room for a 6x4 table on a submarine?
No, there's not. the tables, you could, there's not. You can, I mean, I can see you playing Kill Team these days, but you just honestly don't have enough time. You're really busy. You're really busy. There's not that much time. But it's been a good, just kind of jump from edition to edition, seeing what changed. And from what I understand, skipping 6th and 7th edition was probably a good way to preserve my sanity and investment in the game.
I've read the rules for both of them, and obviously people who play Horus Heresy probably know 7th edition quite well, because obviously that's where that comes from.
Yeah.
And, I like some of the way, the vehicle things work, and the facings, and the glancing blows, and the armour, and things like that, but it's overly complex for a D6 wargame.
I feel you.
And having read 6th edition, and then when I started was at the end of 8th edition, the difference was just massive. Things like playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle, playing early 40k, even the weapon skill, where what's your weapon skill? Yeah. What's my weapon skill? Compare them. Look on this table. Compare strength, compare toughness. Look on this table. Just getting rid of all that just speeds things up so massively.
Yeah. Yeah, and the blast template, everything, and scatter dice, and it's... I definitely prefer the basic rule set from 8th edition and on. So, all right. Well, what made you? Did you start the competitive Dark Angels Facebook page, or did you come in later as an admin?
No, I came in later. There's a guy called Sid who starts it. Sid who? I think he used to play Dark Angels competitively. Now I think he's the world or UK top ranked Imperial Knight player, so he's also got that page. And I think, having kind of gone more Knights than Dark Angels, he wanted someone to kind of help with the Dark Angels page, and I was very, very I was a regular user there and commenting regularly and posting regularly, and he sort of just messaged me and said, "Hey, would you like to admin the page?" And I was like, "Yeah, I would actually." And then I kind of took it over and thought, there's lots of conversations happening, which is great, but I'd quite like to steer conversations so that we talk about different stuff in a bit more depth rather than just the odd sort of thing here and there, because I've picked up so much from that page, so much. And I thought, let's do a topic of the week where we focus on one thing and we just tear it to pieces, so that in future when people come across and kind of go, what's this all about? And go, right, there's a post about it. Go and have a look. There's 40 comments where we go into in-depth detail about why this works, why it doesn't work, how you'd use this, how you wouldn't use it.
Can you give me an example of one of those?
So the first one was Belial. Is he worth taking?
Interesting. Okay. What was the consensus?
No. No. And my first ever competitive Dark Angels list had Belial, because I'm like, he's like the first company captain, right?
Right.
He's the Terminator captain. I'm playing Deathwing. I've got Terminators. Of course I want Belial. What's this? He hits on 2s. Great. He wounds on 2s. Brilliant. Against anything that isn't a vehicle, he wounds on 2s.
He's
flat 3 damage.
Yeah.
-1 to hit. -1 damage. -1 to damage as well. He's a Death Guard. Yeah, with a 3 damage sword. Fantastic. But he gets 4 base attacks. He's slow. You can never get him where you want to get him. And then I had a couple of frustrating tournament games where wily opponents, when I was kind of putting him up front and central, they were charging him and the unit he was stood next to, positioning themselves an inch away from both, and then piling in away from him. So he was then out of engagement range, and of course couldn't heroically intervene because it was past the charge phase.
Point, yeah.
Yep.
Brilliant, absolutely fantastic tactic, but I just got to the stage where he just wasn't pulling his weight. So many armies, deny you rerolls, and actually The chaplain gives rerolls. Ezekiel gives rerolls.
Azrael gives rerolls and CP.
And CP.
Yeah.
Lazarus gives rerolls and mortal wound protection.
Yeah.
Just really, at the end of the discussion pretty much was there isn't really a place for him in competitive Deathwing lists or Dark Angel lists.
So I hadn't seen that post. I came into these things later, but do you just to pile on and belabor the point? Do you think there's any point in taking advantage of the fact that you can have Azrael and Belial in the same list and get 2 Chapter Master rerolls?
So I guess it depends on what sort of list you're bringing. For Deathwing, no. To be fair, when looking at Deathwing, I look at what HQs I need, and it's a Jump Chaplain and it's Ezekiel.
Okay.
End of story. I can't
Fair
bring
enough.
a third, so done. In other lists, yeah, potentially. If I've got an experimental list that I want to try. I'm just building the models at the moment, where I'm going to run 2 blocks of 10 Hellblasters. One Assault Hellblasters and 1 Heavy Hellblasters. The heavy one at the back, the Assault one going forward. So I could see a Chapter Master with each one of those. Yeah, maybe. The plan actually is to run the Redemptor with the Assault and use Wisdom of the Ancients to give them the reroll ones. And keep a Chapter Master at the back with the heavies. Now, I'm not suggesting this is competitive, but I want to try it, see what happens.
I'm telling you, though, big blocks of Hellblasters get a lot of work done. Like a lot of people, and I think the heavy Hellblasters are one of the problems I had with my Green Wing list was that it had a real hard time hitting past 24-inch range, and a big block of 10 heavy Hellblasters might do that. But,
what are they? Is it damage 3 on the overcharge?
They're damage 2 flat. They're strength 8, damage 2 base, 9-3 on the overcharge, 9-4
with weapons of the Dark Age.
With weapons, which is nuts. So yeah, they'll do it, and they can go 36 inches. So that is a great counterfire point.
And of course, hitting on 2s as long as they don't move.
Yep.
Rerolling 1s if you've got someone next to you, so hopefully you're not exploding too often.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's take that opportunity and roll straight into what your current list is. So could you just briefly go over what your most recent GT list was?
So my recent GT list, I've changed it slightly since then, but the linchpin is definitely the Jump Chaplain.
Okay.
Now, the Jump Chaplain can be used in 2 different ways, but for Deathwing, I use him for just buffing. That's what he's there for. He's there to provide mortal wound protection, which admittedly Lazarus can do as well, but he also gives me +2 to charge, which is massive.
Yeah.
And he gives me the extra pile in and consolidate, which again is massive. You've got 5-inch Terminators. If you roll well, you can. I've had a 14-inch charge before, which is crazy. But then you kill what you kill, and then you're 12 further inches up the board. Suddenly your 5-inch Terminators have moved 26 inches. I mean, okay, not often, but they can move far. That extra movement should not be ignored. What I tend to do with him is he will jump ahead of the Terminators, and then the Terminators charge around him to kind of keep him safe. It's risky. Terminators fail the charge. He's in the middle of nowhere. But if you don't do that, they're outside his aura. Mm-hmm. I did try a Terminator Chaplain at one point, but again, I just find what happens often is you fail your charge with your character, your Terminators run off, and you've got a character sat at the back, doing nothing. In the middle, get shot to pieces, etc. So
I think that's always kind of one of the problems I have with maneuvering the Deathwing list is, the way that you organize that little the combat blob is, well, yeah, your characters have to be where they be, and then once the Terminators charge, now they're outside of his range, and so either they're outside the range of his buffs for the rerolls for Litany of Hate. And they're out, and then the next turn they're out of the range to provide character screening. So I think moving him ahead and then getting a charge and just kind of planning around that is pretty smart.
It's also what I do with the next thing I bring is the Apothecary, the Ravenwing Apothecary,
mm-hmm.
and he does the same because he has the Reliquary of the Repentance.
Yep.
And if the opponent have a 4+ invulnerable save, whether it's a character, whether it's Death Guard, whatever. He moves up within 3 inches. so their invulnerable saves now 5 up, which means my chain fists are probably going to take them to that 5 up. But again, it's risky. I've now got 2 characters, in front of my lines. If that charge doesn't happen with +2, then I'm screwed. And I wouldn't really do that if it was going to be a long charge. If it's going to be a risky charge, I'd probably keep 2 units and try with 1. And if that one gets in, then think about what I'm doing next. But if it's a charge of 8 or 9 inches with +2 and a CP reroll,
yeah, that's 50 odds, then a reroll. So call it 75 to 78% chance of success. Yeah.
And the other thing with the chaplain is, I usually take martial interdiction. I usually secret agenda it.
Yep.
And he's only got I don't really spend money a CP on relics for him. I'm not making him a fighter character. He doesn't have mantra of strength. So he's not really the smash chaplain, which is the other way of building him. But I can jump in where I need to be. I can get him next to a character, and I can hit it. And that could get me martial interdiction in some cases, depending on what the character is. So he does have that extra utility. He can also do things like towards the end of towards the end of the game, he might raise a banner if I've got nothing better to do.
Yeah.
I might advance him to the other end of the board and take an objective that's been left. Depending on what's happening. So he's got utility. The Ravenwing Apothecary even more so, because you can do the double move thing, and suddenly he's the other side of the board, and he's on an objective that's been left. Probably if it's like sticky objectives or something, and they've kind of moved off. And it's one thing we don't have in Deathwing is speed. So having those 2 characters with speed, is essential in my book. And the second HQ I mentioned earlier is Ezekiel.
Yeah.
I would rather have a jump pack librarian, if I'm quite honest, but the points cost difference, and you've got to make him a master.
Efficient. Yeah.
So it's more points, it's more CP spent, and frankly, Ezekiel's so cheap, and he gets the built-in +1 to cast. He gets
built-in +1 attack. Yeah.
Built-in +1 attack for long combats, +1 deny at full range, not just your psychic hood 12-inch range, which catches people out. His sword is actually quite good. He's transhuman.
He's got
depending on where he's got 2 up armor for some reason. Yeah. He's also got a 25mm base, unless your tournament says otherwise. That's the base he's still currently sold it. So actually, you can get him into really tiny little gaps and hide him quite well, and kind of get him in the middle of your troops. And yeah, I don't often get him into melee. I don't want to risk him, but he's there for. And all his spells are useful. I'm constantly flip-flopping between which spells I take. The one I recently had but dropped was remove auras, because again, there's so many auras out there that are so useful. But I've now gone for Fights Last, reroll hits and wounds, and remove obsec, because remove obsec can be quite clutch. That can win you points.
So that's Mindworm, Engulfing Fear, and Righteous Repugnance.
Thank you.
The Mindworm, I agree. I've tended on Ezekiel towards Mindworm, Righteous Repugnance, and Aversion, because for those long combats where I get stuck in, I see one thing units you got coming up is an Ancient with Pen and Remembrance. I don't have the CP to take that in my version of this, but the Aversion to put the -1 to hit and the -1 attack if they manage to come in, you can really make a. What do you think about that in terms of like making the Deathwing more survivable in those long protracted combats?
It's good, but we are quite survivable anyway. So for me, that's quite low priority. And which spell are you dropping?
Engulfing Fear, the drop obsec.
Obsec, yeah. The thing is, because I'm in a block of 10 knights, so they've not got obsec. But even when I do have, so normally I'd win some of the Terminators up with them to just get one on the objective, so they grant obsec.
Yeah.
But we're on 40mm bases. If the opponent want to swamp that objective and take it off us, they're probably gonna. They can just sit an inch away and just swamp it with 25mm bases, and they're going to take it off us. So removing their chance to do that, just saying no, you're not having obsec. This is my objective. It's one of the reasons I don't like shock tactics, because I tend to form a triangle and hold 3 objectives. I don't give them up. I don't let the opponent take the objective off me. So shock tactics is never going to work for me, because I'm not going to do that. Oh, you've taken it, I've taken it, you've taken it, I've taken it. If you've taken an objective off me, you've probably destroyed 10, 15 Terminators and I've lost the game.
Yeah, that objective doesn't fit for the Deathwing style of play. For Ravenwing, it's a different story.
Sure,
because I could trade
100%.
90 point bike squads to you all day long. But yeah, if you kill 300 points of the Terminators on objective, I'm not investing in you doing that for my success, because I'm not going to come out ahead on that trade. Okay, so we got Ezekiel, we got a Chaplain. You mentioned a big brick of 10 Deathwing Knights, and I assume the Knightmaster is marked for command, so he's got the Mastercrafted Flail.
Correct. Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, that was a trick I picked up off, I think, YouTube channel called Winter's SEO. I think he took it in his tournament list.
Oh, yeah, we know him. Yeah.
Yeah. And, just looking at it going, oh, it's 2 damage, but it overflows. Okay. 3 damage and it overflows. Wow.
Now we're talking.
Because, even more than the fact it overflows, it just means 1 failed save, and against 1 wound models, that's it, there's 3 dead. And I've got to feel no pains. They don't keep getting saves.
Yeah,
if one fails a save,
gone through all that, and it's just...
Yeah.
No.
And, effectively I've got Thunderhammers and Chain Fists. It's not an anti-horde list. So to have 1 character who can go, oh, you're a horde, are you? Right, okay. I'm just going to mow you down. It is handy. And it seems weird because there were so many good relics that just go, oh, just Mastercraft. It sounds like a bad idea, but it's not.
Yeah, I've been doing that for basically every time I take Deathwing Knights. That guy gets a Mastercraft, because if you end up in combat in the surprise, like I played against Votan for the first time, and there I was like, oh, this is gonna be super useful. They have a horde of 1 wound models, but turns out that little apothecary that can ignore 1 failed save just basically negates this guy. But yeah. So you got to go with the hammers first, and then because it has to be the first failed save, and then you roll the Mastercrafted Flail in, and it starts going down. But
the stats of it are so weird, because it has more AP than the maces, but only strength 6.
Yeah.
So there'll be many games, like if I'm playing against Knights, he'll be my first casualty.
Yeah.
You've got the option. It doesn't matter. Like what's the thing that you need to succeed in this game, right? Do I need the hammers? Okay, cool. Sergeant takes the hit. Do I need to get this guy into combat with like Necron Warriors or something? If anyone's still playing those, it just gone, just wipes them out. So, but 10. Why 10 Deathwing Knights? Why not 5?
Because they're the target. That's what everyone shoots at. That's the threat. That's the crazy thing that people are like, oh my god, you're going to get 10 near me, and they're going to panic. They're the ones that are going to get the -1 damage. They're the ones that are going to get the Ezekiel and the Chaplain running with them. And people are going to be scared, because they're going to go, what's their threat range? It's potentially 17 inches with a +2 to charge. And actually, if you kill 1, it's more than that, because I can bring it back to life. I can bring it back in and bring it back closer. You can't ignore them. 5, you could focus down 5.
Yeah, that's true.
And I need to make sure that if someone's trying to focus them down, they've got to work really, really hard on it. If they don't kill them, I'll just bring them back. Yeah, and they're cheap now. They went down in points. They're as cheap as a Thunderhammer Shield Deathwing Terminator.
Yeah.
And they get an extra 2 to hit, because they're hitting on 2s and they're not getting the -1.
Yep.
How often do you find yourself using their stratagem?
Almost never. It's a good stratagem.
Yeah.
I just, generally speaking, they just kill everything they hit anyway.
I guess when you've got 10 of them, yeah, that's true.
But even without 10, I mean, I played against at this particular GT. I played against Knights, and he had that thing where he turned all his weapons into mortal wounds. He fired his entire army at my Knights turn 1. And killed 8 of them, right? I got 1 back, had 3 Knights left, and they still managed to win Rampage, But then he's got to think, what do I target now? Do I target those 3 knights or that block of 10 with chain fists?
Yeah.
Because I win 2 more blocks of 10. So there's never a good answer for, when your opponent's prioritized, there's never a good answer of what do I target. And that's why I do it. I run big bricks. I do combat squad from time to time, but I never combat squad the knights.
Okay. So they're your like, I put them in the front, they're going to move to the middle of the board, they take all the buffs, and they're just like, look, this is the thing that you're going to have to deal with. If you don't deal with it, it will charge you and beat you to death. If you do deal with it, then all the rest of my Terminators are unimpeded.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
It's your distraction Carnifex, except it actually hits
Does
a lot harder.
of damage. Yeah, I guess these days Carnifexes actually do okay. Maybe we
Screaming killers.
Yeah. Maybe they're not distraction Carnifexes anymore. I don't know. Okay.
But you mentioned the ancient. Obviously the Pennon of Remembrance with the -1 damage.
Yep.
Massive. But what I also do with him is I try and keep him near some normal Terminators with cyclone missile launchers. So what I tend to do, if a combat squad, I'll run the Knights and 5 Terminators up to an objective, because the Terminators will give them OBSEC. So the fact they don't have OBSEC doesn't matter. As long as they get 1 on the objective, they're OBSEC.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I keep the Ancient near them as well is because what happens when they take fire is I kill off the Cyclone Missile Launcher first. He's then got a 50-50 chance of firing that Cyclone Missile Launcher on death. It's the opponent's turn, so he hasn't moved. So he hits on 2s.
Yeah, that's nice.
And then I bring him back.
Yep.
Yeah, then you bring him back, yeah. So I see you don't... do you make him the Chapter Ancient, or just leave him as the regular Ancient? So
I've made him the Chapter Ancient in my new list.
Okay. We'll talk about that in a bit then. Yeah. Why we went to that decision. Okay. So let's talk about your big bricks of Terminators. I see 3 Terminator bricks here.
Yeah, so there's the Knights and then 2 identical bricks. The bricks have 2 Cyclones. And I think in my old list it was 2 shields and the rest chain fists.
So I see Stormbolter Power Sword, yeah. 1.
Yeah, apart from the Sergeant, obviously with a Power Sword.
4,
so 5, I keep the Sergeant with the Power Sword because he's cheap. And he's a chaff killer again. We don't have a lot of chaff killings. Having a Power Sword, high AP, lots of 1 damage, fine. Originally I dropped the shields and I brought them back. And I dropped the shields because when AOC came out, everyone was like, drop the shields, you don't need shields, you're a 2-up, you can be a 1-up in cover, you don't need the shields. You do need the shields. There is so much AP4 and AP5 stuff out there, it's untrue. And they've got nothing better to shoot at. They haven't got a tank to shoot at. They haven't got a dreadnought to shoot at. They've got Terminators to shoot at. They've got Terminators to punch in the face. You'd need the shields. So I put 2 in. And they tend to sit in ruins where I can, so I kind of trail them behind. So they want a 0-up save in ruins.
Yeah. 0-up save is great.
I like it.
Yeah.
And, they tank the hits. And then again, if I need them, I bring them back. If a combat squad, I tend to put them both in the same squad, because what I'll do is I'll probably teleport in just 5 Stormbolter Chain Fists as a bit of a distraction somewhere, because you can't ignore that. Mm-hmm. It also means, if I've got 5 in Deep Strike, the enemy have to deal with it. They have to, they have to screen me out. They have to put things at the back, so it's less stuff up front. But I'm not too worried about them. I mean, 5 Terminators is expensive, but they do a lot just for being there, so I'm not too bothered what happens to them, so I keep the shields where they need to be.
And if you deep strike in 5 guys with Stormbolters, you can Deathwing assault them, and if there's chaff somewhere, you're just picking up chaff everywhere you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. But it's one of those odd ones, though, because, depending on where you're deep striking, you don't want to shoot the thing that perhaps is the only thing you can see.
Yeah, because if you shoot them, you want to charge it.
Stuck. Yeah.
So you want to be able to charge it.
Yeah, and you don't rely on that charge. Mm-hmm. I mean, I quite often don't deep strike them behind enemy lines. I quite often deep strike them to support somewhere else, deep strike them in the middle or towards the flanks, because I know if I fail that charge and I'm in their back lines, those are going to move away from me, and I'm going to have 5 Terminators stuck doing nothing for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
but the threat of being in their back line is enough. They have to screen against it.
Yeah, just holding them, just the fact that they are in reserve creates an opportunity cost for your opponent that they have to dedicate resources to creating screens. And if they don't, then yeah, you can drop in somewhere, maybe flip an objective on them.
But it depends who I'm playing. It depends on the mission. It depends on the army. I'll often not. Like I went against Alpha Legion, and I decided not to combat squad, and just make 3 bricks of Terminators. With just come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. Form a triangle. Characters in the middle. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Best of luck cracking that nut. So, okay, so two squads of these with 2 Cyclones, all the Chain Fists, and then Relic Terminators. What's up with these Relic Terminators?
They're cheap.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
It's either Relic Terminators or it's Terminators with double Chain Fist, double Lightning Claw. Sorry, double Chain Fist, double Lightning Claw. Terminators with double Lightning Claw can be ignored. They can't shoot. They can just be, whereas with Relic Terminators, they've got Stormbolters. At least they can do something. You'll often find that they're generally my home objective holders. 7 Relic Terminators. Who's going to come and deep strike them? And if they deep strike, I can all-spec scan. I can, I can survive most things that hit me. I can kill chaff. I can shoot stuff that comes down for R&D. I can shoot it once it's done its R&D before it gets off to do something else. I've dropped them in my current list, not because I think they're bad, but because the problem I've got is I've got nothing that can really do actions. Every time I do an action, I've got a choice. I've got either 5 or 10 Terminators doing nothing, or I spend 2 CP so they can fire.
Yeah.
All right.
And I sat long and hard and thought about it and thought, I've got a character that hasn't got an aura or can't cast. And I thought about it, and my recent list, I've dropped the relics and swapped them for 3 Blade Guard and 2 Command Squad. Not because I think they're particularly better, but because they've got more utility.
Yeah, that's one of the things I see you having a struggle with here is covering, having a big footprint on the board. So I like hold 1, hold 2 missions. You're probably going to do real good. How about hold 2, hold 3 missions where you need to hold 3 or 4 to score 8 or 12 points?
Yeah. Until this last Grand Tournament, I'd won a total of 1 6 objective missions. Always struggled. But I think it was a realization that hit me. What I used to do was, I think, my rationale has always been form that triangle, keep tight, keep castled. So what I would do is I'd hit a flank. Okay, take 2 on the left or 2 on the right, keep 1 in home. Take that flank, and then try and push out. And it never worked because the board's just too wide diagonally. You can't do it. And what it also allows, a lot of those missions are sticky objectives. So what it would normally allow is the opponent to get the other objective in the far corner and then just leave it.
Yeah.
Leave nothing on it. And then just everything just pens me in. So at this GT, I decided instead of doing that, I'd go for the 2 middle ones and ignore the 2 outer ones initially. Once I've consolidated, then I could push out with combat squads or with a deep strike squad to get that 4th objective, and that worked massively better. Massively better.
So let's drill back down on that a little bit. So you say starting from like your middle. So like I know there's one of the ones that's hold 2, hold 3, which is like kind of it's I don't know. I call it the slanty deployment, where it's like a table like triangle to triangle, and there's 4 down across the middle.
That's awful.
Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
So you push to the middle, and then try and sit there, and then you're like let them waste themselves against you, and then once they've tried to trade into you, turn 4, turn 5, you push out to grab the one on one of the flanks that's more applicable.
So for example, what I would do, or what I did do, I actually took Oath of the Moment, which I usually don't take on 6 objective maps because there's no objective in the middle.
Right.
But what I did is I moved my knights and my characters to the middle, 5 Terminators either side of them, relics at home. Told the 2 center objectives. Relics at home, 5 Terminators kind of supporting at the back, 5 in deep strike just to make the opponent have to deal with them and not be able to go everywhere, and also mean that they can't immediately sticky objectives, because if they do, I can just deep strike 5 Terminators on.
Yeah.
And actually what I found is having the knights in the middle, even though they can't shoot, meant the enemy didn't want to charge the 5 Terminators either side, because I countercharge.
Yeah.
And it was sort of analysis paralysis, where the opponent's going, what do? I can kill those 5 Terminators, no problem. But if I do, I get 10 Terminators into me. And it just worked. It just worked.
That's probably the best argument for OSA moment on a non-center objective board I've heard. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, obviously, it's difficult because you've got to be entirely within 6 inches.
Right.
But because my characters are there, my characters are almost always entirely within 6 inches. So they're still scoring there.
Yeah.
So I'm still getting 10 more if I can kill vehicles and characters.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. So what army was that mission into? Do you remember?
So there were 2. So the mission, the first one was Knights.
Okay.
The Imperial Knights, who say killed 8 of my knights turn 1. So that one went slightly different to that. Actually, that one was just a bit. That was just an odd one, actually, because that was one where I didn't fail a single save, but I also didn't make a single attack roll. So that was
games, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The other one was let me have a look. Blood Angels. Yeah, it was Blood Angels, and whenever I fight Blood Angels, I mean, firstly they look at my army and go, "Oh, great, my +1 to wound doesn't work."
Doesn't work. not a whit.
But then they go, "Well, that's okay, because I can control the combat. I can decide where I'm attacking." And they tend to do one or two things. They tend to just gather up and just blitz. Throw everything at me. One turn. Everything hits. And it will either kill a load of stuff or bounce off and die.
Yeah.
Or they can skirt around the edges and try and nip and come in and try and do a bit here and try and do a bit there and try and score an R&D or whatever, this, that and the other. And they struggle, and you can see them. And I'm looking at my list going, if he hits me there, I'm buggered. But they don't, because they're looking at it from their point of view, and they're looking at how hard can I hit, how can I score, what can I do? And they do struggle. They're not used to it. They're used to their +1 to wound. They're used to, I'm going to wound on 2s. I'm going to do my,
Yeah,
and especially when you put the
through,
yeah, and then especially when you put the -1 damage on, he kind of goes, "Oh, I'm all sanguinary guard, damage 2, brilliant." And you're like, well, yeah, but not if you hit that unit.
Yeah, yeah, and then that's the one. That's the one you present, and Line Unbreakable is another excellent stratagem against them, because the big bricks of Death Company just like, nope, only the front rank.
Yeah, so I did that when he hit my relics on my home objective with 2 squads of Death Company, and got as many in as I could. I mean, I'm not one of those players that will gotcha. I told him about it. I made sure he was well aware of it. But you can only get so many in. The way I positioned my, I knew he was coming, so I positioned in such a way you can only get so many in, and it absolutely blunted his attack.
Yeah. And
then I go back in with my lightning claws,
hit not used, rerolling wounds, and
or chain fists. When they're AP4, AP5, it's like what save?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So my experience with Line Unbreakable is that it has to be like, you have to plan for its use, and you have to position yourself anchored up against something impassable to really funnel them in, because you have to declare it at the beginning of the fight phase, not at the beginning of the when they're targeted. So they have the opportunity to pile in to negate it, right? So if you're like, they gotta, they pile in, they've got plenty of movement. I'm not even gonna bother with this, right? Because they'll just roll around me. But especially against things with big bases, right? Like Thunderwolves or stuff like that, then it can really, really hurt bad.
Yeah, it's a really useful. I mean, you could even use it just to force them to position themselves in a certain way, to force them to come forward and around, which might get them off an objective. It might get them away from a character aura, for example, where they want to string back to try and get some buff. You're like, well, I'm a Line Unbreakable. Do you want that buff, or do you want to get as many things into combat as possible?
Okay.
You know, and I think one of the things I remember sort of hearing about quite early on is the more decisions you can give your opponent, the better.
Yes.
Because there's some more opportunities for them to make a bad decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to give your opponent decisions. You know, the minute your opponent can look at your army and go, I know exactly what I'm doing.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
And that's why I like Deathwing, because I know exactly what I'm doing almost every game.
That's good. That's good.
You know, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what army you've got. It doesn't matter what the map is. I know roughly what I'm doing.
So it really, saves the brain power, right? You don't have to spend calories thinking about what your strategy into this is, right? So you either pre-plan all that, or is okay. Well, this army does one thing, and it's generally applicable in all cases, so I don't have to work through it. Okay.
Also,
I'm glad you talked about the
games.
Yeah,
it just makes fast. Funny enough, that's one of the things when me and my brother were practicing before our very first tournament. Our games were taking 4 to 5 hours, and we were looking at it going, "How do you play in 3 hours?" You know, and the answer is you learn your list really well, and you know what you're doing, and you pre-plan, you get your strats ready, you know what you know, and now 3 hours is a long game at a tournament. You know, I'm very rarely playing to time. But, you know, I think that's key for any army. You've got to know it really, really well. I looked at potentially moving into playing Chaos Space Marines, but I just don't know them well enough. It would take me ages. I'd run out of time.
It's a really complex army. They're so, I bought the Codex. I have a Chaos army as well, and it just, I don't know, man. There's so much stuff you can do with them. But yeah, no, it's this late in an edition. I don't know if I want to learn a new army. So,
well, yeah. That's a good point as well.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, you said about the changes.
How do you change this moving forward?
So the one of the things that came out of, again, the Facebook group was someone looked at my list and went, "Why have you given your chaplain a chainsword? Because he's crazier than a chainsword." I said, "Well, because it's free. You know, he's not a buffing character. It's free. It gives him 1 extra attack. You know, if he is jumping in somewhere and hitting someone with his Crozius, I get a bonus chainsaw attack. Brilliant." He went, and this guy went, "Yeah, but a combi melter's 5 points." I was like,
"That's fair."
Oh, it is. Because if he's going to shoot, he's either going to be sat behind Terminators just shooting, in which case a melter shot, great, that might do something. But if I am going to go for martial interdiction, and he can jump next to a character, so he's going to ignore lookout, sir. Shooting him in the face with a melter before charging in might do the trick.
Yeah, and the way melters work, I mean, is like you don't want to actually kill the guy. You want to kill him in hand-to-hand combat. But yeah, there's some situations where that would just like really soften him up, and because Croziuses aren't the best weapons that you can take. Yeah. You know, -1 AP, 2 damage, like yeah, sure, but a Melta, okay, that's interesting. I might have to take the chainsword off my jump chaplain.
Yeah. Funny enough, I've got a few jump chaplains, and I repainted my Space Wolf one, repainted his shoulder pad, chopped off his chainsword, put a combi melter on, and he's now my jump chaplain. Yeah, I haven't played that yet, but I think that's a good idea. Let's give that a try. And I haven't got the CP to give him a relic. I've got 1 CP spare. I need that for Secret Agenda.
For Agenda,
So I haven't got. Otherwise, I'd give him, you know, either a Teeth of Terror or the whatever the Crozius,
the Benediction
Crozius. Yeah,
the 3 damage.
But again, investing a CP in a relic for a guy who may never get into combat, who isn't designed to get into combat, is it worth it? I don't know. Maybe not.
Okay.
So the other change was losing the relics and switching them to the 3 Blade Guard and the 2 Command Squad. And my plan there is to have them initially guard my home objective. Now, none of them are OBSEC. I get that. But because there's 2 units, I can hopefully use 1 to screen the second. So whatever does get to charge me only hits 1 of the 2, which means I get a counter charge.
Mm-hmm.
If they ignore my home objective, which many armies do, I've then got Blade Guard who can move 6, who can then leave and just leave 2 command squad.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap. 90
it's pretty
points
cheap
to cover home objective.
And I've got actions, like Data Scry. Now, I usually run banners, and with Data Scry, I can run banners and Data Scry. They can both do an action, and everybody else can go off and do their own things.
So, okay, so when you say 2 command squad, you mean a 2-man command squad, not
Sorry,
2 separate command squads.
Yeah.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
And they're
with
equipped with
Thunderhammer Storm Shields, because I just want them to live. Same with the obviously Blade Guard. They've got Storm Shields because obviously that's what they come with. But because I want them to live, I'm not worried too much about what they do, as long as they hold that home objective, do actions, and then potentially in the late game, the 3 Blade Guard might come out and do something. Depending on what the opponent does. Yeah, 100% they can, but they're not part of my strategy per se.
Right.
If you know what I mean, they're kind of a redundancy. They're kind of there if needed.
Right.
So those, my philosophy of list building, I've got 2 main philosophies. One is don't change more than 2 things when you change a list.
Good advice.
Yeah,
because you can't test it properly if you're changing too much. If you change a whole bunch of stuff and it doesn't work, was it because of this thing or that thing, or what did I lose? So
you're speaking deeply to my engineering heart right now. That's good.
Although to be fair, no, I did make a 3rd change saying that. Don't make more than 3. It's starting to sound like Monty Python, isn't it? Don't make more than 3 change, because I did promote my my ancient to give him the +1 to hit.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a huge change though. That's like you're adding one piece of functionality. You're not like changing a fundamental core strategy.
No.
So,
but the reason I did that was, again, just to give a bit of utility, save me having to use Fury the First from time to time, which is a strategy I do end up using. Or even combine it with Fury the First when I charge, so my Chain Fist is still hitting on a 2+.
Oh, love it. Brilliant. Yeah.
That's
really good.
I often use Fury the First on the opponent's turn to hit with Chain Fist on a 2+.
Which is something no one's going to see coming.
Yeah. And then potentially Righteous Repugnance for the rerolls and blah 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 blah. So it's minor changes. The other thing, my strategy in building Deathwing lists is, if it's not a Terminator, why isn't it a Terminator? And that might be controversial.
Well, that hits something I was going to ask you, Alan, because something that Heath and I have been talking about for months now is having Ravenwing Knights in lists, because we've seen some people run big blobs of them and they've done really well. And Heath has tried running big blob of Deathwing or Ravenwing Knights and has struggled. And the fact that you can actually throw them into a Deathwing list and run them around, because they have the inner circle key where they can do martial interdiction, they can go in and not mess up all your special rules. And I was going to ask you what you thought about that. And it sounds like that is not something you're interested in.
No, I've tried it. And frankly, if your opponent wants to take out a bunch of Ravenwing Knights and there's a bunch of Terminators, and they decide to focus their fire on the Ravenwing Knights, they're going to kill them.
Yeah, that's my experience. Is they're not that hard to kill, and the transhuman and the 2-up armor with armor contempt is, Once again, there's people out there that know how to do it. I'm not one of them, so
I'm the same. I'm probably one of the worst Ravenwing players out. I've tried Ravenwing armies, and I really don't. I don't understand. My mentality is sit brick and
right.
But it's like if you bring a Redemptor, well, all the anti-tank fire is going to go into the Redemptor. It's going to die turn 1, and then they're going to turn on your Terminators.
Just give them something to kill.
You're giving them something to kill. So every time I look at it and go, if it's not a Terminator, why isn't it a Terminator? So, I've tried more characters, and I think you can go to the stage where you're over protecting your Terminators, and actually just having more Terminators might just be the key. So I did a little trial. I did 4 days at the LGT, London Grand Tournament, because they had an RTT on the Friday, and then a 2-day Grand Tournament and an RTT on the Monday. And because I was there for 4 days with 11 games, on day 4, I thought my brain is going to be fried anyway. Let's do an experiment. Let's see if my theory of if it's not a Terminator, why not? And I think it was something like 50 Terminators. I need to double check the exact number. but as cheap
That's
as I could
impressive.
get them, and a chaplain. And I went 2-1.
Nice.
Only losing to a Jakari player who came 56th in the main GT. A really good Jakari player who threw everything at me turn 2. Literally, his entire army hit my front line turn 2. And it was still close. I got some bad rolls, especially with my chaplain. But yeah, if it's not a Terminator, why isn't it a Terminator? And I see people trying to do too much. Because it's like, Deathwing, they're not fast, they're not this, they don't have a lot of firepower, and they try and make up the weaknesses. But in my experience, it just over dilutes. I think if you're going to bring a tri-wing list and bring some Terminators, that's fine, because they're there for a reason. They're there as a punch, they're there as a shield, whatever. If you're going to bring a Raven wing list and you want to bring some, a patrol detachment for infiltrators or Redempt or whatever, fine, I can see that. But if you're going to run Deathwing, you've got to lean into your strengths. Because the minute you dilute your list too much, you're taking away those. And actually, your opponent can then pick off those other bits or focus more, just killing Terminators, and you haven't got enough to do what you need to do.
And then you're below critical mass on your Terminators. Yeah, like if you've got 15 or less, then they can modern armies put out enough damage that they can kill 15 Terminators.
Yes.
30, different story, I think.
Yeah, so 37 in my last list, and now it's going to be 32 and three Blade Guard, so 35 tough things with a couple of characters.
Yeah. Blade Guard are definitely nowhere near as resilient as Terminators.
No.
They are not. Yeah, it's surprising how much of a difference it makes. I ran a unit of 6 Blade Guard and split them just to do what you're talking about, like try and get the mission object actions, try and get the banners, and a unit of 5 Shroud Runners just shoots them to death without that much trouble. But Terminator's not so much.
No, especially when they're in ruins, Yeah. But it's the combination of, the lack of AOC, the 3-up basic save.
Yeah.
2 up with the shield, but without
3-up base,
without
2 up with a shield, so no armor.
But without AOC. Yeah. Whereas your Terminator with shields are 1-up save or 0-up saving cover. It's big. But they've got the 4+ invuln still. So they're still still able to shrug off a melter potentially 50% of the time, or an Armiger's chain fist or whatever, something that's
you can't just throw trash into the back line and think that they're gonna do it. Like a unit of 5 Vanguard vets isn't gonna walk into 3 Deathwing Blade Guard and just like guarantee to win that matchup. So they have to really put something serious into it, right? Same thing with 2 Deathwing command squads. Like you got to think about what you're gonna try and send into that matchup. Because it's not easy to win. You can't just go clear them off an objective like a unit of servitors or 5 intercessors or something.
Oh, and when you charge 100%. Into them, when you're charging into them, then you're taking away the big disadvantage with the Thunderhammer of being -1 because they're just going to get the +1 for not moving. So you're actually making them better.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen a lot of people, experimenting with taking Stubborn Defiance with infiltrators, for example. And I look at it and think, well, if it's 5 infiltrators, then all the opponent's got to do is move 5 models onto that objective, and it breaks your streak. Yeah. You're done.
Yeah.
Against knights, that's an Armiger. An Armiger touches the range of the objective, and the streak's gone. It resets.
Yeah.
You put 10 on there, okay, you've got a bit more chance. But if your opponent sees 10 on there, they're going to focus that down, I think. I think they're going to go hard into it. And again, I look at it and go, that's however many points worth of Terminators I could have.
Yeah, I agree. I tried to build a list that would successfully do Stubborn Defiance, and you basically have to commit 500 or 600 points to your list. Between the infiltrators and I went with a Phobos Librarian to cast the shrouding on them so you couldn't target them, and it's still and then Blade Guard or something in the front to screen them, and that you're spend so much effort to prevent this from happening. And it's just like, you know what? I could do other things. I could just do other things.
Yeah, I mean, I took Stubborn Defiance one mission. It was the one where you can move the objectives. The AB one.
Yeah.
And so you can move an objective. You can't move it into your deployment zone, but you can move it in range of your deployment zone.
Yeah,
that makes sense, in range of it. In fact, that was against the Alpha Legion, and that was the one where I decided not to combat squad. And one of the main reasons for that was because I wanted 10 Terminators on that objective. Because you ain't shifting 10 Terminators without putting a lot of effort into it.
Yeah.
And he chose to ignore that objective, which was good for me. But at the same time, it then meant I had 10 Terminators doing very little, with ranged fire, not getting to use their, the Terminators aren't really there for range. Even with Cyclones, you might get lucky, but it's only AP2, AP3 turn 1. With Arm of Contempt, AP1.
Not enough.
D6 damage, very swingy when you do get through. So you can't rely on them. But that was one where I left them on until turn 4. And then he moved his Disco Lord he charged his Disco Lord into another group of Terminators that was relatively close. And his Disco Lord was my martial interdiction target, which of course he didn't know.
Okay.
So I had 10 Terminators within relatively, short. Have to move with a relatively short charge, and I was like, "Yeah, I can either drop 5 points on Stubborn Defiance and get 15.
Yeah,
or stay where I am. So
it seems like a good trade. Yeah,
but I would have got 15 had I wanted 15. But I had to guarantee the martial interdiction and 10 Terminators into a Disco Lord.
10 Terminators with chain fists into a Disco
Chain
Lord.
fists, yeah.
Man. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, have we really? I don't think we've mentioned why chain fists, because I get asked that quite a lot. Why not power fists? And people will go to me, I prefer the guaranteed 2 damage. I can kill a Marine with 2 damage. I want 2 damage. If I've got D3 and I'm rolling 1 damage, then potentially 2 chain fist hits to kill a Marine. It's not good. And if that's your meta, I get that. Yeah. If you're into Marine meta, I can understand that. But chain fist getting extra pip of AP and in an AOC meta,
that's the clip. That is 100% why I like them.
You've got a lot of -1 damage out there between Death Guard, between Dreadnoughts, lots of other things can give -1 damage. Well, if I'm rolling a D3, I've got a chance of rolling a 3 and getting effective 2 damage, net 2 damage.
Yeah.
That's worth it. And then against vehicles, flat 3. So, against Knights, or Dreadnoughts, because effectively against Dreadnoughts, it's flat 2,
and you're re-rolling. And you're re-rolling all your wounds.
Are you re-rolling if you're in
if you're Assault Doctrine?
Assault Doctrine. Doctrine. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm a fan. I've got half of my relics with chain fists, and then I'm just always trying to scrounge up more. Because I want to go all chain fists because it's definitely.
So why relics?
Well, one, like you said, they're cheap, and for me personally, model limitations. I have a bunch, so I've got 10 that I painted up just because I wanted to, because I didn't have any, and then I've got 10 regular Terminators, and I've got 10 Deathwing Knights, and then all the rest of my Terminators are like. Got flamers and plasma cannons and other stuff, and so I'm a little model limited on it because I bought most of my Terminator collection back in 5th edition when Apocalypse came out. I just got a bunch of eBay lots. So, but relics, because they're cheap, and honestly,
but then they're no cheaper with chain fists, though, are they? Stormbolter chain fists are the same.
They're cheaper than regular Terminators because the chain fists are the same price as a power fist. So
yeah.
Well, once again, model limitations. So if I do 5 with Chain Fists and 5 with Lightning Claws, they're still cheaper than a regular squad of Terminators. And you can do, you can split them up however you want. And I think there's some utility in saying, okay, well, the Sergeant's got a Chain Fist. And then maybe if you want to, hold someone your objective, or you can actually split it up so you have mixed utility, 2 Chain Fists or 3 Chain Fists in one squad and 2 or 3 Lightning Claws in the other. And then... Yeah, they make a good objective sitter because it's 185 points to sit that unit on your home objective. Which once again, a command squad I think would be better because they can do the action and it's 90 points out of the game instead of 185. But yeah, and then I wish I had some. Actually, the what do you think about the Reaper autocannons for the relics?
So again, with the relics, I wanted them cheap. So I think with relics, if you're gonna, the normal Deathwing Terminators get the advantage of mixing your loadout, so you can put your shields in, you can put your cyclones on. With your relics, you can put grenade launchers on, you can give them an autocannon. But like, I haven't used my normal, the autocannon that came with the 6th edition Dark Angels. I stopped using that ages ago, and I think the same is true with the relic because you can't rely on your heavy weapons because you're unlikely to just be stood still along, a lot of the time. You like to be moving, so hitting on 4s, or you like to be hiding them because you're taking an objective. So, if your relics are sitting at the back taking an objective, you could put them out in the open, do a bit of shooting, but is it really worth it to risk someone focusing them and suddenly losing home objective? So I generally hide them until they're relatively safe and then pop them out and start with a bit of Stormbolt fire. So I don't really see giving them a heavy weapon. It's just going to make them eat up more points. The nice thing about the Cyclone, of course, is it's on top of your Stormbolter.
Yeah, so you get all of it, and you get
unlike then of course you get your Rubric Marines who can have the autocannon and the thing on the top somehow, and move and fire without penalty. How did they get away with that?
Brutal.
Yeah, well,
and don't they have extra AP on top of all that?
And extra AP with their Stormbolters for some reason. Yeah,
because they're made out of dust. Somehow that makes they're magic robots.
So for me, what I did was, because I looked at my original army, and of course, chain fists are hen's teeth. You get 1 per box of 5. It's like, well, how do I make an army full of chain fists? And in the end, I reached a simple conclusion. I bought a load of chainsaws off eBay and just, snipped, glue, bit of green stuff.
There you go.
Done. And I'd hardly recommend other people do that.
Does the new Horus Heresy boxes, do they have like a... So that's I bought a special box. That's how I'm going to do like the combi melta and like combi plasma and plasma for my bikes. But can you get chain fists out of that?
I think so. I mean, I bought 2 boxes, so I probably should know because that's when my relics came, because everyone went out and bought Horus Heresy boxes.
Yeah.
And suddenly the market was flooded with people selling stuff. And I bought my relic Terminator so cheap because everyone was competing to get rid of, all these boxes they'd bought and didn't actually want. But I built mine all with combi bolters and lightning claws because I wanted the option of cheap Deathwing. Yeah. So I don't know, but there must be. I'm sure there was.
There's a lot.
There's got to be some. I know I
was at the Michigan GT and I bought some cataphracted Terminator sprues that had extra weapons just to get the extra arms, so that when I open up my Horus Heresy box that my parents bought me for Christmas at Gen Con, I'll have enough chain fists to make cataphracty chain fist Terminator. So yeah, there's plenty, because it was like $1 a sprue, and I'm like, oh, look at all these special weapons that are hard to get unless you spend $40-$50 on a Devastator squad. I'll just buy all these multi-meltas for $1. Thank you. So yeah, I did the same thing with those boys.
It's funny because I do casually play Blood Angels as well, and I've just bought 3 boxes of Sanguinary Guard, and they only come with 3 swords per box of 5. And it's like everyone wants to win swords, so where do these swords come from? I don't know. And like Death Company, you only get 1 Thunderhammer, 1 2-handed Thunderhammer per box of 5. So where do all these 2-handed Thunderhammers that people run, come from? People must either buy box loads or 3D print them or whatever. I don't know.
3D printer go brrr. Yep.
Yeah. But it's a pain as a sort of, someone playing a sort of casual army where you don't want to, have to go to all that hassle, just build it out of the box and
right. Yeah, no, I agree.
So Something else I've seen a bit recently is people experimenting with normal Terminators, not Deathwing Terminators, for the teleport homer.
I
yes.
was going to bring that up,
yes.
and I ran one of those because it gives you the option to, basically it puts behind with that and like a unit of Deathwing Terminators, of command squads, gives you the option to take behind enemy lines. That's what I usually use it for.
I mean, I've looked at it, and I've not used it, but I looked at it, and if I'm right, in your movement phase, you remove them from the board.
Yes.
And then they come back on the following turn.
That is true. Yeah.
Which means you've got a unit of, let's say you win 30, 35 Terminators. You've got a unit of 5 to 10 who you've taken off the board, who may have taken damage already, I don't know, or I don't know what they've been doing up until that point, who are then doing nothing for a turn.
Yes, that's the downside. It's not an instant thing. It's they have to skip a turn, which is the downside. I agree. That's the thing that makes me about it, because if they could just on the same turn just like wings of fire redeploy, oof, let's go.
In 8th, wasn't it that you could you place the teleport home and then it could just jump back to it? I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, it's changed now to where you can drop it in on characters. So, like, if you have, you can drop it in on like your chaplain,
you can,
or whatever.
But you can. But again, it's that being off the board for a turn that just makes me kind of nervous.
That's where you can fix. So, like we were talking earlier, like if you deep strike in a corner and you fail your charge, what do? Well, you can pick them up and redeploy them. It fixes that. And then the one time I've used it recently in a tournament, I took a squad that was at the back of the board guarding my home objective, and I needed them somewhere else, so I picked them up and then brought them in more forward later. So that's where I found it useful. Plus, again, we were talking about giving your opponent decisions. When you go, these Terminators, not only can I deep strike put them in deep strike at the start of the game, I can bring them on the board and then pick them up again and put them somewhere else. And people go, wait, you can do that? And I'm like, yes. And so all of a sudden the screens stay in place a lot longer than people plan on, because they're worried about the fact that Terminators can move around.
Yeah. So one thing I just picked up, I just checked the book. The teleport homer rule, you can drop them into the teleport homer. It doesn't require them to be not in engagement range. So if they like take a charge, you can just right out of combat.
Also,
so there may be some functionality there, which I never realized that. I've always used them as the deploy turn 1, pick them up, turn 2, drop them in with something else into behind enemy lines. It's a pretty narrow use case, but I wanted it. I built that into one of my lists a couple months ago for a tournament where I wanted the option to have behind enemy lines as as another potential for secret agenda, or like, hey, I could do this. And that way, if it's a small elite like Custodes or something like that, I could just drop 2 units into their backfield. They're not going to be able to do anything about it. And that's basically 15 free points for me. Because if you drop them in, first turn, that's 4. If you drop 2 units with behind enemy lines, that's 4 points. The next turn, that's 8 points. Right? The next turn, that's 12.
And your opponent's just ignoring 12 in the back, or, I mean...
Well, as I said,
10 Terminators in the back, they're just...
Well, it'd be 5 plus 2 plus a command squad.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, well, do I pivot and go this way to deal with 5 Terminators, 2 squads of total 7 Terminators that is getting him 15 points, or do I continue with the main thrust of the attack? Right? Once again, it's a decision. If they make, I think personally, if they pivot, it's the wrong decision for them, because I'm going to get at least 8 points out of that. I get them 4 on my turn. By the end of your turn, you're not going to have killed all of them again. So, I'll get 8 points, and maybe if you turn and change the momentum of your game, like, then I can capitalize on that. Once again,
it's worth thinking about, because the objectives are not, the secondaries are not that good now.
Right. So if you want some flexibility, the option to take another secondary, once again, it's pretty narrow use case.
Yeah. I'll think it through. It's definitely worth considering other strategies, particularly once people get used to a certain strategy. Mm-hmm. Although, interestingly, I had quite a few people who I played into at the last GT say to me they had originally spec'd for transhuman because of Leviathan and their prevalence.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay.
But obviously, because of the Leviathan nerf, they'd spec'd kind of out of trying to deal with transhuman. So interestingly enough, I went into a meta where people were telling me they weren't aiming to deal with it anymore. So, the meta does shift and does change, and as people get used to things, I played against the same Thousand Suns player in 2 different tournaments back to back, and so the first time, taking secret agenda, market interdiction, no worries, got the kill, 15 points, no problem. Second game, I go, I'm going to hide one of my objectives. Of course, he knows exactly what objective I'm taking because I've just played him, so he's learnt, he's learnt what to do, but he didn't know which character I changed the character. Still managed to get 15 points, luckily. But people will learn, because people at the moment don't seem to have learned about martial interdiction. They do not, I don't know if it's because there aren't that many Deathwing, Dark Angels players out there. I normally see 1 or 2 at a tournament max, and that often don't do that well. So people maybe don't quite understand.
It runs a little under the radar for sure.
Yeah, but no one so far has ever said to me, "Want to go or secret agenda?" Good, martial interdiction, except that guy, and that's only because I literally played him a month ago at a different tournament.
I've found them in Ravenwing lists. You have Samael is the guy we do, or a chaplain. I also, one time I played a guy, I used a Ravenwing champion to do that, because once he fought, I used Swift Strike to run away so he couldn't catch him, because he didn't have that guy doesn't have an inherent invuln, and I put all the relics into killing power, so I ran in, killed the Orc War boss, and ran away.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people use the Ravenwing champion, upgraded, and then with the special relic sword that he can get,
the Triumph. It's good. Yeah, I like Samael for that because he can fly. So like on turn 3, as he's kind of moving up, you just go, whoop, kill something, whatever character he has, support character that doesn't have an invul, a Technomancer or a Librarian or something like that, and then just whoop, 2 CP bounce away.
See, it's harder for me because obviously I don't have the speed to do things. I've only really got the chaplain who can jump in and do things, and he's not that reliable. But because you get to choose the character, because they don't know A, what you've taken, and B, which character you've chosen. I'll always choose whichever character I think he's going to want to get close to me.
That's always,
so against Blood Angels, it'll be Astorath or Dante. Against Drakari, it'll be one of their combat characters that wishes forward, not the succubus who consolidates 6 inches away. One of the ones that that stays in.
Yeah,
it's going to be someone I know is going to be at the front line somewhere, so I can get some Terminators into them.
Yeah,
it's good. That's a good policy.
Yeah, and the thing about the Terminators is all your killing power is in your combat, and so as soon as they kill it, okay, I'm good.
And of course, because it scores at the end of the game, they don't even know they've got to try and kill you to deny you 6 victory points, because you don't have to announce it.
Yeah.
Doesn't score to end of game.
I usually see people think I've taken Assassinate. It's like, it must be Assassinate. I'm like, it could be. I don't have to tell you. I have to tell you when I score it. Right. So.
Yeah, and one of the games I played, the one game I lost at the GT against an Iron Hands player, I still managed to score that. He screened out his Contemptor Warlord, who was my target. But it screened him out with characters, and those characters could be charged. And he'd put his Contemptor next to a ruin. So I deep struck in, charged, killed his characters, and then consolidated next to his Contemptor Dreadnought and boxed him in against the ruin. And of course, he was twin Volkite, so he couldn't fight his way out. And following turn, utterly destroyed him. So it's things like that. It's things using terrain. But it's hard. It's hard when they're going to screen their characters, because they're going to screen their characters anyway. Anyone's going to screen their characters,
right?
But it's hard with Deathwing to guarantee you're going to be able to get them in and kill something.
That's why it's really the best, like you said, armies that have characters that they're going to throw at you. And if they don't, then they're hurting themselves, like the Disco Lords, right? And the Smash Captains and that kind of stuff, the War Bosses.
Yeah, I've heard some people say they don't secret agenda it because they want the opponent to know. So they've got to make a difficult choice. Again, it's about giving choices.
Huh. Okay. Yeah.
You know, you're smash captain. I'm going to kill him, and then they have to keep the smash captain away because they don't want him to die.
Right.
I can see the advantage. I can see how that could make it hard for them to do what they want to do. But potentially, you're denying yourself 15 points.
Yeah, that's a real like if you're also a master poker player and you're about the mind game, right? And that's if I think in that situation, if you have a skill advantage on your opponent, then that's probably something you would do. I don't know if that's going to help you if you're skill disadvantaged against your opponent or if you're equally matched.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I always go into a tournament assuming my opponent's better than me.
Yeah.
Because I think to think anything else
would be arrogant.
I mean, I've done it before. I've at the LGT on the Friday, I played someone on a national team with Blood Angels and beat him. And then on the Saturday, my first game of the LGT proper, same mission. I was playing against a Blood Angels player who I thought had a much worse list, and who was some, as far as I was concerned, some nobody. And I must admit, I got overconfident and I lost.
Mm. Yep.
And I think, that it taught me a valuable lesson. And it taught me the lesson of just assume your opponent is better than you. And, play against them as if they're going to win. And you need to do everything you can to stop them winning. Yeah.
Okay.
That's fair.
Let me jump back to another list question here. I see that your apothecaries take the grenade launchers. So how do you use the stasis stall stratagem?
I never have.
It's just okay.
I know it's there. The reason, funny enough, that he's got it is because I bought my Raven Wing army second hand, and that's what he came with. Okay. So that's what he's.
Well, fair enough.
It's WYSIWYG. I'm aware of the stratagem, but I mean, is it 1 CP, 2 CP? I can't remember. Is it 2 CP?
It's 2.
2 CP,
which is
for
pricey.
one shot that could miss. That you fire obviously before the charge, because obviously you need to be able to shoot them. And then what? Just so that they can't fall back, isn't it? I think
they can't fall back. They can't fall back. Yeah.
There are certain things that can fall back and do stuff, but a lot of stuff, if it falls back, it's not doing stuff. So if it falls back, I've never used it. I'm sure there'll be a game when I do. I'm sure there'll be a moment where I think I need that thing not to fall back for some reason, and I shoot it with the stasis grenade, and I do the CP reroll and still miss.
Yeah, it's a real hard proposition in Nephilim where you just don't start with the CP to make a lot of fluff choices. So
I mean, that's an interesting thing actually. Speaking of Nephilim, I start with 1 CP.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for Secret Agenda, I'd start with 0 CP. Frankly, because what I found with Deathwing is I don't particularly need CP. It's nice to have. The odd reroll, the odd maybe I might want to march 10 Terminators off the board and counter being stationary and still shoot. Might want to do an action. I might want to do counter-offensive. Probably do want to do counter-offensive. Because you're getting a CP back in both players' turns.
Yeah.
If you really want to do a counter-offensive, you probably can save up and make sure you can do it. But it's not a CP-heavy army. It's not a CP that relies on its stratagems. It relies on its resilience. And it relies on its punching power. And pre-Nephilim, what I'd find is the opponent would go, right, turn 1, I'm spending 10 CP to give this uber buff of doom.
Uber combo,
and just wipe you. Whereas now they can't do that. So I found actually Nephilim's worked quite well into Deathwing because I don't need the CP. I'm quite happy to trickle it in. Whereas other armies want that kind of big alpha strike, the big kind of,
relying on the strength of your data sheet instead of fancy stratagem combos. Yeah. So one other question about the decisions you made with this list. So because you've upgraded to the ancient, mostly for the +1 to hit. I understand that where your CP budget's at, but why not make the ancient so that he has the reroll? Wait, hold on.
You mean the
champion? No.
Yeah.
I was sorry. I was thinking the champion who gives the reroll to charge.
Oh yeah, never mind.
Yeah. To be honest, there's a couple of things I would quite like to have. There's a warlord trait. I think it is. Is it warlord trait or relic? Which is +1 to advance and +1 to charge.
That's
Decisive tactician. Trait. Yeah, and I've seen that used to great effect in the Deathwing list.
I would love to have that, if only for the advance, because there's a couple of times where I need to get somewhere. Maybe on the train that we tend to use, turn 1, you can't see the opponent. The opponent can hide their entire army. Yeah? So turn 1, I tend to advance, try and get as many objectives as I can.
Yeah.
But with a 5-inch move and a D6, you often need to move 9 or 10 inches to get within range. So that +1 to advance could get me on all the objectives turn 1, potentially.
Yeah.
And
it's
then
also a bit of reliability in case your chaplain doesn't go off. Yeah.
In case the chaplain doesn't go off, the +1 to charge, or the chaplain's somewhere else. So that's one I would like. I would like to take the ancient warlord trait where I get obsec or double obsec if they've already got obsec. Yep. That I would take. These are all things. If I wasn't taking secret agenda, this is what I'd be looking to spend it on.
Would it be worth maybe trading the marked for command to get that?
It's a good question.
Yeah,
it's a good question.
Yeah.
And again, it depends on matchups. It depends on the meta shifts, I suppose. If you're going against, you're going against knights and things quite regularly, then I don't need it. But I'm going against sisters,
when you absolutely need it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's tough. I mean, I've thought about getting rid of the Apothecary relic, the invulnerable one. Because it always means I'm putting him at risk to use it.
Yeah.
Right.
But then I think, well, if I'm coming against Morty or something with a 4+ invuln, he's going to take a lot of killing. If I can give Morty a 5+ invuln, that's massive.
The difference is the difference between the 5-up and a 4-up invul. Like, I played in the Necrons a couple days ago and just shoot the champion with the reliquary up next to the Silent King, and then targeting guidance and everything just goes in, and it's a real big 4-up. You're like, I don't know, those things could be 5-up.
As hell.
I think I can count on this. But the matchups where you need it, you really, really need it.
Really, really need it.
But there's a lot of matchups where you don't.
Harlequins.
Yeah.
Bunch of 5-ups, 4-up invulns.
4-ups everywhere. Yeah.
50-50 chance they're going to live, Shame it won't work against demons, but, hey-ho.
Yeah. Demons would be great, and I was kind of thinking maybe that with the prevalence of demons coming out, maybe it would be less valuable, but I don't know, just it saved my bacon that one game into Space Wolves where everything had a Storm Shield.
Yep.
And just park them up next to the Thunderwolves and the Wolfen and just let the plasma, cleanse its holy flame over them.
I think that's the thing. I think when it comes in useful, it comes in so useful.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's worth having, because if I didn't have it, I'd miss it. I'm talking about chain fists that are -5 AP in the assault doctrine.
Yeah.
-5 AP going, I've got 4 pinfall.
Yeah, exactly.
It's big, and I think it's useful, and I think you need to keep looking at your list. You need to evaluate. You need to keep looking and going, did this warlord trait do anything? Did this relic do anything? And if it did, and it would have won you or lost you the game not having it, that's where you make those decisions. And I don't think there's any right or wrong answer. I would never say to someone, you must take this.
Yeah.
Apart from possibly the Pennant of Remembrance, I think you're playing Deathwing. I think you do need that -1 damage. Yeah. Because there's so much damage 3 stuff out there, and that's the difference between a dead Terminator from 1 fail save to taking 2 fail saves to kill a Terminator.
Yeah, with your Apothecary to further throw the math off.
Exactly. Apart from that, if you're playing Deathwing, it's a matter of style, it's a matter of choice, it's a matter of what works for you. Maybe if you're not going to tournaments, what your local meta is. or what you're seeing a lot of tournaments. If it was all demons, if that was all us fighting, then yeah, clearly I'd end up dropping it. But I don't think it's ever going to be. I think demons, for example, are going to get their flamers points value increased quite drastically soon, and but I mean Abaddon's a big one at the moment. He's the boogeyman. Get him down to a 5-up. And okay, he's still going to take a while to kill because you've got to kill him in 3 different phases. But
yeah, you can work on that. And Dark Angels
getting access to Abaddon,
because you can hit him in every phase if you really want to.
Abaddon's one of the best phase cap ones because he's only 9 wounds and does benefit from Lookout Sir, unlike Nightbringer. So he's a hard one, but of course, again, we have a targetable 1 mortal wound spell. So at least we can knock something off him, in the psychic phase if he's hidden. But Abaddon's hard, I think, for Deathwing because any decent player can just hide him.
And when he decides to fight, he is going to kill a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I ran into an Alpha Legion with Abaddon at the LGT, and I think he picked up 7 Terminators a turn.
Oh man!
Yeah. So there are boogeymen out there, and he's something that I need to work out how to deal with. But there's always going to be
the martial interdiction target.
No.
Bad.
But there's always going to be, rock paper scissors. There's always going to be an army out there that's your nemesis. There's going to be an army out there that no matter what you do, you're going to struggle to beat. Unless all your dice come up 6s and all their dice come up 1s.
Right.
So what are your tough matchups right now?
Thousand Suns.
Just because of the mortal wound output.
Because of the mortal wound output. I think I can beat Thousand Suns because I've got mortal wound protection, and I have come close to beating Thousand Suns, but they're tough. Chaos Space means with Abaddon. That's a bogeyman. Drakari.
What about Drakari specifically?
Just the weight of mortal wounds they can put at the fight last, the mortal wounds, just the weight of bodies that come at you. Oddly enough, not the Void Lances. Void Lances I couldn't care less about.
Yeah.
You might kill a Terminator.
Okay, yeah.
It's just the weight of troops. Harlequins still. Some of their Harlequin armies are, potentially quite tough. Again, I'm not really geared up too much. I think the Apothecary will help with that.
That Harlequin Troop Master is an absolute problem.
Yeah.
That dude ignores his little 7/5s,
and they can jump over you and just take out your characters. But yeah, funny enough, my brother was an RTT today, and he's got a Death Guard army, and he faced the new AdMech back to where they were, before
with everything with core,
nerfs.
And
he got nearly table turn 2.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's why they nerfed him.
I don't understand why they've just taken all the nerfs off and not just slid back a bit.
Yeah.
But hey ho.
Yeah.
But the guy went 1-2, so he's obviously AdMech maybe only good against elite armies. I don't know.
Right.
But that's what I've got, an elite army, so it scares the crap out of me.
Yeah. Well, like things that ignore the that bypass your primary defensive mechanic, which is the transhuman. So like the Skitarii Rangers with the rad rounds and Votan Judgment is tough.
Votan scared the crap out of me too. I've not faced Votan yet, obviously very new.
I played into Votan first round of this last tournament, and I won because he didn't have the confidence in his army yet. I just pushed the middle of the board. It was a 5 objective, like table quarter to table quarter. I pushed the middle of the board and just rolled in. And he picked the wrong secondaries. He didn't get out of his deployment zone until turn 4. He basically tabled me. I had 2 squads of troops left, but
too late.
He scored 50 points. I scored 80. So, because I pushed him back hard. Now those railguns are good. And they have one of their leagues gives literally everything a 5-up invul, and things that have 2-up armor. So the Land Fortress gets a 4-up invul.
4-up invul, yeah.
And all those
and
little
they get
dudes,
4 inches extra on their range as well, which makes a big difference with the half range mechanics.
Yeah, and that's the invul saves they make them really durable. I was very surprised by how durable they were.
And you can't reroll wounds against them.
And they have armor of contempt. So
and armor of contempt building. And you've got that stupid champion throwing out D3 plus 3 mortal wounds in melee.
Yeah, with the tactical nuclear hammer. Yeah, he didn't have one of those.
Right.
We had 2 Sagittars, a Land Fortress, a thing of Pioneers, 2 of the characters, the Cap the Calls, like a call and a high call, and then 6 10-man warrior squads, just missile launcher, railgun, everything.
And then I've got the healer to ignore the first damage, and then they bring D3 back every turn, and
bring one back every turn, bring D3 back every turn, and the sergeant has the 4-up invul save, and it has 2 wounds, and they just don't think you're going to charge. Like if they're that league, you're going to charge in, and you're not going to do nearly as much as you think you're going to do. I got 4 Deathwing Knights into them. I killed 4 guys. If even that.
It seems the league to go to be honest, because they're sort of Terminator equivalent. I've only got 2 wounds.
Yeah.
2-up armor save, no invul. Unless...
So giving them a 4-up invul is real
massive.
Clutch.
Massive. Real clutch, it seems no-brainer to me. I mean, there's the toughness one, but for me, I'd rather give my Terminators a 4-up invul than give everyone +1 toughness.
So the Greater Thurian League, which is I think the toughest one, is it? I don't know. They're the ones that have the named call that can just dice manipulate something to a 6. And dice manipulating that Land Fortress's super railgun to a 6 is tasty. My buddy's starting a Votan army, and he's doing that, and it is nuts. It just kills a lot of stuff. It's basically 4 dead Terminators if you fail to save. So, but once again, hey, they're AP4 weapons. You don't get an invul. My Terminators are still taking a 4-up save, basically 4 or 5-up save at worst. No, not that.
Or if I've got a shield and cover, 3-up save.
Yeah. So,
alrighty, guys. I don't want to be a party pooper, but I'm looking at the clock, and I know with the time difference, it's middle of the day for me, early for Heath, but I know it's getting late for Alan, so I just want to be respectful of Alan's time. So is there any sort of last question you got for him, Heath, or we want to move in? I know Alan said he grabbed something. He's going to participate in the monthly challenge this week.
I've got some models,
Cool. Just one last real question. What are your 3 just go-to secondaries? I think we've danced around the topic, but we haven't really just spotted it.
So obviously I've said Martial Interdiction, Secret Agenda. The next 2 are hard, but my go-to is Banners. Even with my old list, Banners.
Yeah.
Even though I'm potentially taking 5 Terminators out to fight, it scores well and I keep that objective. The opponent don't take it off me. So Banners turn 1, when your home objective, you can't get it on any others because if you advance, obviously you can't do it. But if I can get a second Banners off, that start clocking up the points. But the nice thing about Banners is if I get real good ball control in the late game, turn 4, turn 5, I can lay a couple more down. Of course, they score double because they score at the end of the game as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I regularly get 10 plus points in Banners, and hopefully with my slight adjustments to the list, I might be able to get a couple of more Banners down early games. So hopefully that'll do okay. And the third one, sorry, for some reason my brain has switched off. What do I normally take? I should say it's getting late here. The moment, obviously.
Okay.
Even though it was nerfed, you're not going to fall back because you can't without making a leadership test. But you're not going to fail morale because you can't. So that's 5 points straight away.
Yeah.
If it's a central objective, you're probably going to be within the center for 4 or 5 turns. There's 9 or 10. Kill a few vehicles or a few characters, you're getting up to 12, 13. If you're really lucky, you might get 15.
And as you said before, even if it's not a center objective one, there is an argument for taking it because you can control the middle and then just flex to either side.
Exactly.
So
yeah, those are the go-tos, and obviously you then look at what your opponent's army has got, and whether it's bring it down or no prisoners or whatever. But those are the three. If I could only take 3 secondaries, those are the 3 that I would I'd focus
default
on.
to. Yeah.
And like I say, banners was the hardest choice because you never want your elite army really doing actions if you can avoid it.
Yeah.
But it's actually scored reasonably well. I mean, I was looking through I always keep my my scoring sheets.
Nice,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And what I do, and again, this is advice I give any player: keep the scoring sheets, and at the end of the tournament, go and look at them. What scored well, what scored bad, what scored well against which armies on which missions. Because if something's constantly scoring badly, change it.
Yeah.
But what I found is those 3 always score reasonably well. And what I found with Nephilim is, unlike Natmund, where you were going for 15, you were going 15 per secondary. If your secondary wasn't going to score you 15, don't even think about it. And I think the change of mindset in Nephilim is, if you can score 10 per secondary, you probably want to take it.
All right.
Because they're a lot harder to score, especially for Deathwing.
Yeah.
You might argue differently for Ravenwing. You're probably going to get 15 for Death on the Wind.
Yeah, you're going to get 15 for Death on the Wind in the first 2 turns, probably, if you build the list right. Yeah.
But there are some secondaries out there that like that. If you're Necrons, if you're Sisters, you've got some easy 15 secondaries. Yeah. We don't have them in Deathwing.
Yeah.
And Space Marines as a whole don't particularly have those easy 15. So my thing is, if I can regularly score 10 or more, that's a good secondary.
Okay.
I'll take it.
All right.
Shall we move on then?
All right. So, looking at the monthly challenge from last month, we had to paint some green wing, and I did it this month, Heath. I took all of that Napoleonic energy I had for the Michigan GT for last year and put it into my Deathwing, or my Dark Angels. So, first thing I got done, this was part of the backlog, I got 3 aggressors that have been sitting in a box for years done.
Nice.
So that was one.
I like the red on the missile launchers. That's cool.
I was one of those fall. That was one of my favorite parts of that model. And then I was one of those fools that bought Pariah Nexus just to get these. And then you know what I did? I never painted them. So I got that done this month. And then the one thing I did that was not backlog, and I think I picked these up at Gen Con, and I built them as a part of a thing before, but I got another 3 Plasma Inceptors done. Nice. And I've been free-handing a lot of the shoulder pads, although I did have the molded shoulder pads for some of them.
Nice.
So I did 11 Gravis armored bodies in a month.
Oof, that's good. Well, I did. I got 2 models done. This one I'm about to show you is I built and painted in the last 3 weeks. First time I've built something like this in a while, but I got a Repulsor Executioner done.
Oh, nice. Amazing.
Right? And boop. There we go.
And we got swappable guns. Let's go.
Yep. So, there we go. That's what I did there. And then
I particularly like your sort of white panels you've dotted about to break up the green.
This is how I've done all of my tanks ever since I've been playing. Since 2002.
No, I like that because otherwise they can look a bit flat, can't they? Sometimes if they're just
and it's I try to build the interest and build the highlights with the airbrush. I'm not good enough to really make it pop, so I have to break up the big flat panels, and I kind of hit on that with the alternating Deathwing or the bone. But the other thing I did, go ahead and grab them out. This guy.
Oh yeah, look at him, gorgeous. Oh, he's gorgeous.
Yeah, he's got the shoulder pads and the armor and the head are all pop goes the monkey. So
I remember this guy.
Deathwing specific, and the heresy throwback checkers. So,
all right, Alan, what do you got?
So I'm a speed painter, so I paint a lot. It's a part of the hobby I don't particularly enjoy, but I do it to get the end result. So if you ask me what I paint in the last month, it's probably in the region of 30 plus models.
That's good.
But the last thing I painted, Not because I think they're good. Funny enough, going back to the Facebook page, we did a topic this week on why you don't take Outriders in Ravenwing. Okay, which I'm sure you may have talked about in the past, but that was the topic of the week. But I got some Outriders with Imperium magazine.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
And I thought I'd paint them Ravenwing because I'm hoping in 10th edition they get good, and then I've got them ready.
Right.
So,
all right.
How good my camera's
there
picking
you
them
can
up.
see them, yeah.
So I painted as a sergeant. Painted up some Ravenwing.
There you go.
I like that.
Some Outriders. So yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's the last thing I did, and I bought and built myself a Dark Angel specific Leviathan Dreadnought.
Oh,
nice.
Love it. The Forge World one, or
Forge World one.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Now I have full range of weapons already from a previous Leviathan or magnetized.
Oh,
So
excellent.
I painted those just black and silver, so they can go on any Leviathan. And I'm debating. So maybe you can help me. I'm debating what color to do it, because obviously your typical Horus Heresy Leviathan is black, isn't it? It's the old Dark Angels colors.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, it's still around in the 41st millennium. Wouldn't they have repainted it? Would they have left it black?
I would. I mean, I don't know.
If he's inducted in the Deathwing, they repainted the Deathwing. That was a decision that came after the Heresy, right? That was something that came from somewhere else.
Yeah.
So if he's a member of the Deathwing, then I would guess you could paint either one would work. I would think.
Because I painted my relics bone on the basis that they would have kind of repainted them.
Yeah, I would probably go. I've got one that I did green just because I wanted a green dreadnought.
Okay.
But so I did it green with the little like assault launcher looking things on the front. I did those bone.
Oh, that look nice.
But where the hell is that thing? Oh, there he is. There he is. I've got so many dreadnoughts, it's not even funny. Yeah, like that.
Okay.
So once again, that same kind of like alternating green and white scheme.
So you've got like the green, but you've got like the touch of inner circle with the bone. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. So all white. I think you'd probably have to do a lot of like scroll work and stuff to really church it up.
If you've seen the Dark Angel specific one, it has got some extra bits and bobs on it.
I recall that. I think I saw one when I was at Warhammer World a few weeks ago or a month ago.
Yeah, how was that?
Oh my god, it was nice. it was a 20 year like I've been wanting to do this for a long time, and I finally managed to do it. So
it's like Mecca, isn't it? I mean, I live like an hour and a quarter away, and I've been like 2 or 3 times. I never tire of going eating at Bugman's, going to see the display. Watching just looking at the tables they've got.
Mm-hmm.
My
buddy and I packed armies all the way over there from Hawaii just to play, and we played on the one they have that has a Warlord Titan crash in the middle of it.
Oh yeah.
So no.
If you want to know more, if you're listening for the first time, you want to know more, go listen to last month's episode or watch the video, because we got pictures and we got all that on there. That was the main feature.
So no, I would have bought one or a Forge World Dreadnought, but I already had a Leviathan and I didn't want to, and I bought a bunch of other stuff. Like I spent a lot of money. So
it's also on last month's episode.
Yeah. But it would look good no matter how you did it. It might be interesting to make it black and just put like a white shoulder pad or something, just as like kind of a nod up.
Contrast.
Yeah. Because that's one of the things I love about Dark Angels is you've got 3 different color schemes in your army, right? So, and there's always a story you can tell about why you painted this particular model's heraldry the way you did. So.
But it's also like you were saying as well with your aggressors, the red on the guns. It's really quite striking, whereas obviously most chapters would just have like the black guns or the silver guns or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas with Dark Angels, that red contrast against the green, works well.
Christmas Marines, man. The old Christmas Marines.
Oh yeah.
So,
All right, so looking at our community interactions, we had 2 this month, which is 2 more than last month, which is excellent. We had Kyle Daniel, who wants more Dark Angels content. Excellent as always, gentlemen. So we have a return listener. Thank you, Kyle, for returning. Hopefully you'll see this episode. And then there's some guy named Alan P. that said, fun fact, Deathwing Ancient also moves 6 inches. I'm not sure why. That Alan guy, he's pretty clever knowing all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't know who this guy is. He's clearly got something to say.
Must have. Sounds like a genius. Yeah, I picked that up. We had a little conversation, didn't we, on the thing? Someone mentioned it, and I was like, no, they don't. And look in the codex; they've got 6-inch movement.
Huh?
Why?
I never realized that. Clearly, he's an ancient. He's got his knees replaced. Like he's strong.
He's got Tartarus armor.
Yeah. But again, an extra inch makes all the difference. So I'm told.
Mm-hmm.
But it's these little things that this is what I love about the 40k community as a whole. But the more you kind of delve into nicheness, coming specifically to Dark Angels, people spot this stuff and they share it, and you reshare it, and people find out and they go, that's 6 inches of movement. That might mean maybe if I put him at the front, he can reach an objective on turn 1 and do an action, while everyone else then advances around him.
Yeah, and especially because you do his banner in the command phase.
In the command phase.
Buffs out, and it won't be affected by the fact that he's doing an action.
No, you'd lose your fight on death aura.
Okay. You're probably not going to get killed on turn 1 anyway.
No, and if he's with a bunch of knights, they can't shoot on death anyway. They've got nothing to shoot.
Right.
So it's things like that someone tells you the thing about the multi-melter and the chaplain. You go, oh yeah, and that's what I love about this community.
Yeah.
Combi melter, sorry, multi-melter would be fantastic.
That would be amazing.
And it's things like this that I love, that people are sharing and resharing and coming up with ideas and letting them know how it went. Oh, you tried those infiltrators stuff in Defiance. How did it go? Is it worth me doing it? Things like that, and people feeding back in. And I think it just benefits the community as a whole, and hopefully we'll get Dark Angels further up the scoreboard. I think we were currently sitting at something like 34% win rate the last few weeks or something.
Yeah, well, like I said, that's why we wanted to do this podcast and try and do that long form deep dive content on some of this tech. Hopefully, it'll be useful to somebody. So
yeah, but I think Ravenwing certainly, if you want to be top, are probably where you need to go. Probably with a Green Wing patrol.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think Deathwing have got some legs. That'll be my sort of takeaway. I was at the stage where I was about to give up and just go, they can't win 6 objective maps. But I proved that they can.
Very good. That's what we like to
see. Yeah.
All right, man.
Well, thank you, Alan, for coming and joining us this month.
Yeah, anytime.
Thank you for inviting
We'd love to have you
me
on.
and my cat, who's won't leave me alone. No, it's been lovely. It's been really nice. Been really nice being on. And if you're ever back at Warhammer World, hit me up and.
It'll probably be a minute, but I will take you up on that. So yeah, it's a long trip and an expensive one from Hawaii, but I would love to do it again sometime. So.
All right, so thank you all for listening to this month's episode of the Path to Redemption, the Warhammer 40,000 Dark Angels podcast. Our next episode will come out in December, so please subscribe, like, comment below if you're watching us on YouTube, or contact us if you're using your preferred podcasting service. Last but not least, we'd like to thank Purple Planet for the use of their music. Until next time, I'm Bailey from Nicholas Wargaming.
This is Heath with Table of Hawaii.
Stay loyal, Angels.
Oh, yeah.
That's out, so stay loyal, Angels.